Computer. Okay, thank you so much. So I'm very excited to welcome Bill Brown. Brownie is a longtime friend of the Rogers Hornsby Chapter. I say this every time because it's true, and I'm so grateful that he has connected with us on a number of occasions. He's been to San Marcos multiple times. He's joined us to tell us about his broadcasting career, to tell us about the Houston Astros, to tell us about the things that he's working on and things that he's interested in. He's also joined us virtually. He's written several books, some of which I'll mention during the course of our discussion today. And he has a new one that's out most recently from this past year about sports broadcasting that we'll touch on as well. But the big news is that less than a month ago, Bill Brown was announced as part of the class of 2023 for the Houston Astros Hall of Fame. I was very excited to get this news. Rand and I were at Minute Maid Park for Astros Fan Fest. We actually saw Brownie and his wife Diane in the hallways, in the concourse around Minute Maid, and he didn't even nudge me to give me a hint. He didn't give me a wink to let me know. I remember, he said, "Oh, I didn't know that we were going to come, but here we are." I was like, "Well, I'm so glad to see you." We took a photo. I shared on the website, but that was a real thrill. But yeah, so he's going to be joining second baseman Bill Doran, who played with the Astros in the 1980s, a very popular second baseman. I remember Bill Doran very, very well. So they're going to be inducted in a pregame ceremony at Minute Maid Park in August for Hall of Fame weekend. And the accolades just get longer and longer for Brownie. He's also in the Texas Baseball Hall of Fame. In 2004, he was inducted, and he's on the Media Wall of Honor at Minute Maid Park. That was in 2011. He was also voted as the Texas Sportscaster of the Year by the Texas voters in the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association, now the National Sports Media Association. And so I just want to give you a little more background about Bill before we kind of open this up. Bill, this will be sort of like an interview format. I'll toss some questions your way, and hopefully they'll be the kind of pitches that you recognize and will knock out of the park, I'm sure. But Bill actually started his career calling play-by-play for the Cincinnati Stingers, a professional hockey team that was part of a professional hockey league. He also did play-by-play for the Cincinnati Reds from 1976 to 1982, so got to witness some of the big red machine. He then joined the Astros in 1987, and I find this very interesting because that's 1 year after the Astros lost to the Mets in the 1986 National League Championship Series, and it's 1 year before Craig Biggio arrived to the big leagues. So, Bill, you probably didn't know 1987 as a transition year. That was your first year, with the Astros, and you couldn't have known like what was to come. But I guess looking back, it does seem like a turning of the page of the franchise from one era to the other. And I'm wondering if you could just share with us, what that was like, kind of arriving on the scene in 1987 after a very successful campaign for the Astros in 86 and in high hopes, and then not realizing, hey, there are two Hall of Fame players that are just around the corner, but no one knew it at the time. What was that like, Bill? Tell us what that experience was like.
Well, that's going back a long time, but I still have pretty vivid memories, Gilbert, because I was in Los Angeles at the time, and kind of a weird thing that I really think it would take up too much time to explain, but I was working for a sports channel on cable with the Financial News Network, and you'll be puzzled by that. But anyway, it was called Score. It was called FNN Score, and we talked sports. We ran highlights and scores and things of that nature. But I really had not done baseball for 5 years after leaving Cincinnati in '82, and probably didn't expect to be back in baseball as a play-by-play guy, because that's just the way things go. I got a really good chance there to do Cincinnati games, as you mentioned, and then that came to an end, and I was taking various other sportscaster type jobs, but not doing play-by-play baseball. And so I was just so happy to get back in when we came to Houston. But heck, they hired me, Gilbert. I think it was almost the beginning of spring training. They really took their time with this search. and they had fired Gene Elston that fall. And so they started interviewing people, and that took a long time, and they narrowed it down to 3 and brought each of us into Houston to do. They actually sprung an audition on us, which none of us expected, but they had it down to 3, and I guess they had a hard time deciding which of the 3 was a better fit for them. So they had us all do the same 3 innings of the same game on tape, and so they could evaluate us, compare us against each other on the same game. But I didn't get hired until, heck, it was almost the 1st of February.
Wow.
So I was having a really hard time, grasping where the Astros were in their history. I had watched, like you did, the playoff series with the Mets, which was fantastic. But at that point, I was just a sportscaster / fan. I wasn't even an applicant for the job at that point, or I would have paid a little more attention probably. But yeah, just like you guys, and watching Billy Doran and Mike Scott and Glenn Davis and Nolan Ryan and all those guys playing one of the most fabulous postseason series ever. So when I arrived in Houston, I was just trying to prep on the fly, so to speak, and cram about this team because I just had very little chance to prepare for the season. So I didn't have any kind of sense, Gilbert, of where this team was, whether it was close to the end of an era. I was just scrambling to do each game.
Yeah, it sounds like very much learning on the job.
Yeah, it was. I think probably a lot of you could have done a better job than I did, especially in the beginning. But everybody was so welcoming in Houston. I had the feeling that they were going to be, somewhat patient with me while I made the rookie mistakes that everybody makes upon joining a ball club. What I did know was that everybody listening probably knew more about the team than I did. So in that sense, I wasn't going to try to tell any stories or give any background into what they already knew.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, one of the books that you've written with your friend Tim Gregg about your friend Zach, right, to support the National Foundation for Ectodermal, I can't pronounce this word.
Dysplasia. Yeah.
Dysplasia. Yeah, thank you so much. My Baseball Journey, a sportscaster's story, the foreword by Craig Biggio, and we'll talk a little bit about Biggio here in a moment, but one of the things that I really noted in the foreword to this book is just how much he recognized how fair you were in your announcing and in your treatment of the players, and you come from like a journalism background, and that's high praise from a player, to say of a journalist or a broadcaster that, he told it like it was, he was fair. That's high praise, isn't it?
I couldn't have hoped for that. And Craig's been such a good friend down through the years. Jeff Bagwell's been such a good friend. So, and not only are these 2 of the franchise icons, but they really treated people in the media very, very well. And I couldn't have asked for anything more from those guys than what they gave. Really.
Yeah. Well, and then I think them recognizing, the quality of your character and your professionalism. I mean, that plays a part, we're all human. It's sometimes not so easy to treat someone well if they're treating you badly, but they seem like they went out of their way, to recognize, how fair you were. And that's something I really appreciate. Even just from my own personal involvement in listening to you call games, that was something I very appreciated throughout the years of watching the Astros.
Well, thank you. I think we all realize that most of us have played baseball at some point or another, what a difficult sport it is, how difficult it can be. And I was spoiled in Cincinnati because of how good the Big Red Machine was. But still, the players constantly talked about how hard it was to play the game. And even the Pete Roses of the world would remind people every now and then when they were giving these glowing reports about his hitting and his latest, 5-for-5 game that, hey, if you hit 300, that's a really good season. That's a lot of failure there. And so I think we all understand that. And we realize what a high level all these players perform at. And then, of course, at the end of my time in Cincinnati, you talk about ending an era with the Astros after '86. They were an older team, and it took them a while to get younger and regroup with the Biggios and Bagwells. And in Cincinnati, that happened, and they lost 101 games in '82, my last year there. So I had seen that, to that extent. And, the year before, I don't know, some of you may remember the strike shortened season of '81. The Reds actually had the best record in baseball, but they did not go to the playoffs because the season was divided into halves, and they were, like a half game out of first place in the first half and maybe a game and a half in the second half. So overall, they had the best record of anybody, but the way the season was divided, they fell a little bit short in both of those halves. So it was so weird to go from best record in baseball to 101 losses. Yeah. Very, very shocking. And that, of course, always stayed with me, seeing how quickly that can happen. And boy, at the end of that '82 season, the Reds had tried to get young, and they had, but the young players did not pan out for them. So, and that makes me appreciate even more, how Biggio and Bagwell did take hold early in their careers and then on their way to the Hall of Fame. And now, we've seen these other guys come along, Yordan Alvarez, the latest, and, Bregman and Altuve and the whole group, and how successful all these young players were early in their career. That is not always the case, as we all know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it occurs to me, that you got to watch the entirety of Craig Biggio and Jeff Bagwell's careers. You saw them as young players trying to prove themselves. They're trying to stay at the big league level, not get sent back down, and see them have great success as the team started to improve. And then, as Bum Phillips used to say, knocking on the door and then kicking the door down. Mm-hmm. But you saw them, the culmination, getting to the World Series. But then that ebb and flow that you're talking about, you kind of saw that broke down, and talking about 100 lost seasons. Then you saw that again in the early 2000s. And then this young core, right? Many of them who are still around, led by Jose Altuve. So, it's just so fascinating to me. I could talk to you all day, Brownie. And, I just get so excited thinking about this history of the Astros.
Well, and, you and I have studied it. I think probably everybody on here has studied the history of the team and how fascinating things were at various intervals of time. But this current run is something longer than I expected this team to have. And because, people have moved on, and, they've been successful elsewhere. You've had Correa, and you've had Verlander and Cole, and these are major stars on the team that left. And I remember in Cincinnati, after 1976, when the Reds won their second straight World Series, they traded Tony Perez to Montreal. And the reason was that Don Gullett, who was their ace left-handed pitcher, was a free agent that year, and they wanted to replace him with another left-handed starting pitcher. So they got Woody Fryman, who's a left-handed pitcher from Montreal, in the deal, along with a right-handed reliever, Dale Murray. And that was the first year of free agency. And I remember Bob Housen, the general manager of the Reds, when he accepted the trophy in '76, saying, well, this is going to be the end of an era in baseball, because with free agency, teams are not going to stay together the way they have traditionally down through the years. And what a prophetic statement that was. So now we're all used to, all these free agents who move on from one team to another every single year, and how the front office has to adjust and try to fill in and replace and, build from within, all these things. Well, it didn't work for the Reds, because Tony Perez was the glue in that clubhouse. He was the one who kept Joe Morgan and Johnny Bench and Pete Rose and all the egos together. And they missed him in the clubhouse. They really did. They would all tell you that now to a person. And I thought, actually, when George Springer left, that would be the case with the Astros, because when he walked in that clubhouse, he lit up the room. He started getting on guys, and he'd, do the loud joking and things of that nature, which wasn't really his nature, except when he got in a clubhouse. And that's what you find. You find people, when they enter a group, sometimes take on a different persona, a different personality. And this is very common in sports. But Springer was the light of that clubhouse, and I just thought they would really miss him. Altuve is a leader, but he's a very quiet leader, not at all like a Springer. So I was shocked when they did as well as they did when Springer moves on. But that's kind of the every year challenge of teams right now with free agency.
Yeah, very, very much so. Because you don't know who's going to step up to fill the void. I mean, are they going to be able to? Can they compensate? Can they adjust? But yeah, I mean, it's an all-star team. If you look at the players that have left the Astros, during their World Series runs, right, since 2017, you could assemble a team that would be top notch. And the Astros have somehow figured out a way, to keep this run going. And I know you're retired now, but I know that you follow the Astros still and you watch them closely. But how much longer can they continue to do this?
I've been surprised, as I mentioned, but when I look at their lineup right now, I am just scratching my head for when have I seen a better lineup than this? And I might have to go back to the Big Red Machine era. I don't know, because it's just a perfect lineup. Now, that's predicated on everybody being healthy, of course, but getting Brantley back adds to what I thought was a struggling offense at times last year. And of course, Pena shocked everybody. Jeremy Pena just shocked everybody last year. So I must give all credit to the Astros front office. In my mind, going into the season, I thought, well, I don't know what they see in him. I'm looking at a guy who's missed a whole lot of games with injuries in the minor leagues. Don't know how they could project him as a starter. I really thought that Aledmys Diaz would wind up playing about half the time at shortstop, and then ease Pena into the lineup and, nurse him along, and he'd learn some lessons that would put him in good stead. But I was concerned about his health primarily, and I really thought shortstop was going to be a problem last year. So guess what? I was watching a guy who's a rookie MVP of the league championship series and the World Series, and that was just astonishing to me.
Yeah. So I could go on and on, but I'm afraid I'm losing some people in the audience that I don't, I'm thinking about the Dodger fan in the group, and I'm thinking about others. Yeah. What I want to do is I want to transition, because Brownie, I'll talk about the Astros all day long, but let's transition to your broadcasting career. What you've done, how you've done it, what you've witnessed, all of these things. The most recent book you've written is a book about broadcasting, right? Sportscasting 101, the road to play-by-play. You've seen a lot. You've announced different play-by-play sports. Dominant, of course, has been baseball, the 25 years, 30 years with the Astros. What has changed, do you think? Because there's a lot that's still the same: the preparation, the announcing, from your perspective, the fair-mindedness that you provide. But broadcasting has changed, fandom has changed, the sports media has changed, how we watch games, all of that. Can you just tell us some of what you've seen, the biggest changes, maybe some for better and maybe some not so much, that from your perspective?
I can remember as a kid listening to KMOX in St. Louis, Harry Carey and Jack Buck on the Cardinals, having a little transistor under my pillow late at night. Mom would come in, say, "Are you asleep?" And that's a question that can never be answered by yes, but I think I answered yes, but nonetheless, I just was in love with the rhythm of the game on radio and the way those announcers put you there in the seats at Busch Stadium. And there weren't very many statistics given in those days. That was not a thing. It was just painting the picture. It was pretty simple compared to now. And then flash ahead to where we are now, and you've got every number in the book that's coming your way out of that radio. I'm not criticizing anybody, because I did it. When I did some radio, I felt it was an absolute necessity to give each player's batting average, home runs, runs batted in, his first time up in the game. And then not so much after that. But it was vital. And I remember when I was a kid, we got the St. Louis Post-Dispatch because we lived in a small town and we didn't get a Sunday paper that was from our hometown. And I would look at this Sunday batting averages, and they'd have everybody in the league who played to any extent at all listed. So, a couple hundred names, something like that, just listed in a long column. And that would be how I would find out about statistics in baseball, because you didn't get much of that from broadcasting. And there was one TV game a week, Saturday game of the week, which everybody watched every week, every baseball fan. And, they'd feature different teams, but you didn't care. You just wanted to see the game because that was your only chance to have the visual, unless you were lucky enough to go to a major league ballpark. So now you have every game televised, essentially. You have every kind of statistic you could ever imagine on the screen. You have betting odds on, what are the odds on this guy hitting a double here? Yeah, it's just crazy how much information there is right now. I think it's overload. That's just my opinion. I can remember doing a game with the Astros on TV a couple of years before I retired. And we had what they call a bug. It was a little graphic at the very top of the screen with the logo of the network on it. And they would have what they call a drop down graphic. So dropping down from that bug, there'd be a little bit of like putting up a sheet of paper with two lines on it would drop down, and they'd have something like fielding independent pitching. Like this pitcher's FIP is 3.25. And I would see that, and I would try to explain a little bit about what that meant. So then we would have, as limited as my ability is to understand it and explain it, and that was considerably limited. But then there would be a conversation maybe the next day with the producer and me, and he'd say, hey, you don't have to worry about explaining that FIP. We're just putting that up there for the real aficionados, the people who just can't get enough stats. I said, well, no, I do have to explain it. He said, no, you don't. I said, yes, I do. I have people coming up to me on the street corner saying, hey, what is FIP? Yeah. So I said, what good does it do to put this statistic on the screen if people don't know what it means? Yeah. So I think it's overload myself. Other people may enjoy it. You've got, and this is an honest point that television producers make. All these games are on in bars. Nobody can hear the audio. So this is what we do. We put numbers up there. We put visuals up there for them, for their enjoyment of the game. All right. I'll buy into that to a certain extent. I think that's a fairly small percentage, really, of the true fans who are watching in that fashion.
Well, you're also reflecting the changes in what's displayed on the big board at the ballparks. El Grande at Minute Maid Park, they're adding more of those modern day statistics, the sabermetrics, so-called sabermetrics, that is just supplemental, right? So if you don't know what it is, then you probably don't even notice that it's up there. But then for the diehard fans, they appreciate seeing that because it's another way to think about and evaluate the game. So it's about giving that information. But thanks for sharing that about the sort of difference of opinion between you and the producer, because the producer, has a different role. We're going to provide this information, but again, I recognize it very clearly because I'm a former journalist. I used to work at a newspaper as a journalist, and you recognized your role as translating this for your audience. You have to tell them. You can't just put it up there and expect them to know it. So I really appreciate that, Brownie.
Sure. Well, and of course, much more video replays and things of that nature. So it's gotten a lot of complexities to it from the old days of black and white television. I have to say most of them are definitely for the good. When you think about the quality of digital video and audio right now, you're talking about leap forward by miles and miles and miles from where it was at the beginning. And I've written a few articles, but it would take a lengthy book to catalog all the changes in technology in sports. And I threatened to do it one time, and then Tim Gregg said, well, that would take about 2 years of research. And I said, well, then I'm out. But no, it would be an interesting book.
Yeah.
And just, I've talked to network directors and network producers, and I go back to Tony Kubek. Does anybody remember when Tony was on the Game of the Week? Yes. And I think Tony is responsible for the role of the analyst progressing to where it's gotten right now, because he had so much credibility with the players, having been a good player. And then he was such a good broadcaster that he could really cross that gap from the people who hadn't played to the people who had, and explain exactly, okay, here's the player's job in this situation. I talked to this guy. This is what he told me, and he did interviews that they would drop in during the game. So he was the forerunner for where a lot of analysts are right now. And they're very, very good at it. And that's why a play-by-play guy on TV must recognize that he's the traffic cop, and his partner, the analyst, is the guy who's going to get the bulk of the airtime. And that just goes without saying. People want to hear what the analyst has to say. And I think it makes a better telecast.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of broadcast, being part of a broadcast team, I mean, I remember Jim DeShays when he was your partner, and you were pretty much the straight guy, as they say. And Jim DeShays was sort of the joker, and would come out of left field and would, almost like he was trying to get you to, get a laugh out of you,
Yeah.
And you had to stay professional, to say, no, my job. But, I still remember your little chuckles. But tell me about working with the different broadcast partners you had, because they've been quite different. Jim DeSays is one of a kind, for example, but tell us a little bit about that.
Well, of course, Larry Durker, when I got here, when I got to Houston, Bill Worrell was doing HSE home games, and Larry Durker was doing radio for the Astros home games. And then on the road, it was Larry Durker and I doing, it was mostly Channel 20 at that point. So Larry was extremely instrumental in my development as an Astros broadcaster, because he knew everything about the team. The great thing about Larry was not only was he excellent at explaining what just happened on the field, but he also was such a student of history and had been a big part of the Astros history that I didn't have to worry about that at all. And that's extremely rare for an analyst to have that kind of depth of knowledge of everything about the game. But it was easy to just rely on Larry. And Larry knew how to make use of the airtime, between pitches. He knew how to pause, pick up a story, finish a story, things of that nature, which are important. So he was, I'd say, the major reason that I was able to sort of fit in on Astros broadcasts. And then when he went down, of course, to the field to manage, Jim DeShays joined me, and we had 16 years together. And at that point, he was doing home and road. So we really worked a lot together, got to know each other. And it also helped that he had been a pitcher when I was here as a broadcaster too. We got to know each other a little bit there. So there wasn't a whole lot of need to break the ice. But the more he got comfortable with it, and he was a little bit different than Dirk in that, as you said, Gilbert, he wasn't as serious. He liked his humor. Now, Dirk liked humor too, but JD took that in a little different direction with the Seinfeld references and things like that. But I had no idea what he was talking about, but I knew it was funny. And so we laughed a lot more on the air. I think we had a lot more fun, but he taught me the interesting thing about one-sided games as a broadcaster is, hey, we've got to entertain these people. It's 10-2 here. They're about to leave us in droves in terms of the game itself. So he would come up with something. He just had another gear mentally that he reached when the game got out of hand, and he started becoming an entertainer. And I had people come up to me and tell me, hey, I can't hope for enough one-sided games, because that's when he really gets funny. And I really enjoy that from him. And it was enjoyable to work with him too. And then Alan Ashby was kind of a combination. Alan was a more serious guy, but had the insights of having been a catcher. So they were all different, as you say. And it all required a little bit different pacing and timing and things of that nature. But they all did a fantastic job.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just been so much fun, and I want to let everybody in the group know that this isn't just going to be Gilbert's favorite topics, talking with Brownie, all these things. We're going to open it up to questions from the group. So I want you all to be thinking about those. You can drop a question in the chat, or you could also just use the raise your hand function on Zoom, and I can call on you if you've got a question. Before we turn it to that, I just want to mention again the class of 2023. This is going to be the fourth time that the Astros have done a Hall of Fame ceremony at Minute Maid Park. 2019 was the inaugural year, and then they did 2020. 2021 was wiped out, of course, because of the pandemic. And then we had the most recent 2022, Terry Poole and Tal Smith. Tal Smith also being someone who visited with us during a winter meeting. And Larry Durker also visited us at Old Main in San Marcos a number of years ago for a winter meeting. So it's neat to hear those names being brought up. But, Brownie, one of the things I always loved about Hall of Fame weekend, I think I've been to each of these ceremonies. I often go to those games in August before my semester starts. It's like a last hurrah of the summer for me. But one of the things I loved was hearing your voice announcing the Hall of Fame inductees. So,
Well, thank you.
you know who's going to do it? I mean, I hope you're not saddled with that.
No, that wouldn't work. But yeah, I was joking with the young lady in our front office who handles that. She said, "Well, I guess you can't MC it this year." I said, "No, I don't think that would work." But I always have looked forward to that. I really, really enjoy it, and I don't know I haven't heard who's going to do it.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a thrill to see you put on that orange Astros blazer and join the Hall of Fame for the Astros. It's a real thrill, just because I associate your face and your voice with the Astros so much. So it's a real honor, and we're really proud of you and glad to be part of all of that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, Gilbert.
Yeah, you're welcome. Of course, you're welcome, Brownie. So Jan Larson's got a question, so let me hand it over to Jan. Jan, go right ahead.
Okay, Bill, thanks for joining us today.
Sure.
I had a question about your pregame preparation and how much time you'd spend on doing that. And then did it vary depending on if it was the dog days of the season, game 100 against a midweek game against the Padres or something like that, versus when the Astros were taking on the Braves or a team that was really a rival?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks, Jan. I was a big believer in preparation. I know Gene Elston was too, and Milo Hamilton certainly. And I watched Milo and heard about Gene, and I just think that's the role of the play-by-play guy. So I wanted to develop a feel for what the fans did not want to hear, because they had already heard enough about it, and go in some different direction if possible. And, there are the basics of what we talked about before, statistically setting up but you can't escape the basics. You have to really cater to every viewer, whether it's somebody who's watching his third game or somebody who's been watching the game for 40 years. There are certain basics that you are duty bound to report. You give the lineup, you give the stats, give the pitcher, you give a little bit of background. And there are times later on some games when you can tell stories. They get one-sided, or you have rain delay or whatever, and so it's really difficult to prepare for that. But I would always try to have some things that were evergreen, so to speak, stories from history. Or one thing I did when I got this job, knowing that I did not have a knowledge of the history of the Astros and Colt 45s, was to go to the Dome in the winter after that first season of '87. I didn't do basketball. I didn't have other assignments, so I had the whole winter to do this. And I went in and I went through all the old history books, so to speak, all the record books, the books where they had the clippings of newspaper stories from big stories down through the history of the team. And I went back to the beginning of '62, and I just started taking notes. I got home, I put them in the typewriter, typed them up, had a file so I wanted to be able to say if the Astros were playing, we'll say the New York Mets. I wanted to have some things that had happened down in that season series history down through the years ever since they began in '62. That might be of interest, you know, and things of that nature, things that you file away, you may never use it, but you need to have some material on hand in case things get really boring, you know. But the good thing about having Larry Durker with me was he would remember these things and he could comment about them. And so that was really golden for me. Other than that, what I did was all winter long, I had index cards that I made out on every player, not only on the Astros, but on every other team the Astros would play. Wow. So I had this huge file of index cards, including the minor leaguers who might be called up that year, and just had the basics on there, you know, height, weight, what he hit last year, where he was drafted, where he was born, what he had done in the minor leagues, where he went to college, all these basic things, because I didn't want to have to remember that. And I didn't want to have to flip through the media guide and try to look it up during a game. That's a no-no. You can't really take your eyes off the field that much at all and do a good job at this. So the index cards were perfect. I kind of copied it from some other broadcasters who did that too. And I was able to have those, and that was a mental crutch. It was there if I needed it, but if I didn't, I wouldn't talk about it. And so that was part of the preparation. Then every day I would keep a record of every team in the league. You know, New York Mets, what'd they do last night? Who pitched? Who hit a home run? I'd have one line. It'd be a one-line entry in a notebook, spiral notebook. On the Mets, I'd do the same thing for the Padres, same thing for the Giants. So when we played them, I could look back through all their games. Now, of course, that's on the computer now. It wasn't when I started, but I still preferred to do it because I would color code things and put different notes in there that were not listed in some of the websites that I would go to, like Baseball Reference. Baseball Reference is one of my favorite websites, but Baseball Reference didn't have things in exactly the fashion that I wanted to view them. So I did my own notes every day. I do, you know, a couple hours of that. I keep my own stats on the Astros other than what the team provided us with and the league provided us with. And so it's pretty much an all day long thing. But, you know, we all know it's still like a hobby when you get to the ballpark. The prep is not so much of a hobby. The prep is more like work. But I tried to have the opinion that when I got to the park, I was having fun at that point. Because I was talking to baseball, and that's what we all enjoy. I was talking to, you know, broadcasters on other teams and managers and coaches and the players, and we're just talking baseball. Well, that's not, I don't consider that to be work, actually. So it was pretty much most of the day type of prep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Bill.
Sure.
Yeah, great work there. Great question. Thank you, Brownie. Monty, I think is still with us. Monty, did you have a question you wanted to share? And then we'll get to Ryan's question from the chat. Monty?
Okay. Yeah, great. Yeah, Bill, thanks for joining us. Congratulations on being inducted into the Hall of Fame. It's great.
Monty, thank you. And thank you for helping me this winter with that project, by the way. Also.
Oh, sure.
Very helpful.
I'm waiting for the results, so keep me posted.
Okay, here it is. And I need to find, can you email me your address so I can send you one?
Okay, super, thanks. Yeah, Bill and I don't want to give it away. Bill and I were working together on something related to Latin American baseball. So I just give you a brief update. The 65th edition of the Caribbean Series just finished last night. The Dominican team won. It was played in Caracas, Venezuela, so I was not able to get a visa to go. But anyway, the Caribbean Series keeps on moving on. And
Great.
Tigres de Licey from Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic won the tournament.
Okay.
But Bill, I wanted to say, you know, talking about changes in broadcasting, you're, you know, as a Cardinals fan that relocated to Texas, I really appreciated your objectivity and professionalism in broadcasting games.
Thank you.
You know, when, like you, I grew up listening to KMOX. radio, Harry Carey, Jack Buck, Joe Garagiola, Mike Shannon, that whole team. But when we moved here, gosh, there were these two guys named Brownie and JD that did the ball games on Fox Sports Southwest. So that was wonderful, and I appreciate your guys' style. Miss seeing you doing games.
Thank you, Monty.
But great job, congratulations. I did want to throw out a quick question to you in terms of changes in broadcast. And I'll throw a theory at you. And my theory is that, especially watching a game on TV, once the number of broadcasters in the booth goes past 2, my interest kind of wanes. I think the quality of the broadcast wanes. You and JD doing a game, tremendous. You know, you go to a network broadcast where you got 3 guys in the booth or however many people, it just seems like the quality of the broadcast goes downhill. I wonder if you had any thoughts on that.
Agree with you perfectly. I know as the play-by-play guy, and I've talked to other guys who have been in a 3-man booth situation. It's the play-by-play guy who has to get out of the way. You know, you still want to give the basic essentials that you need to pass along. But in order for that third person to get any kind of airtime, the play-by-play guy has to move out of the way. And I personally don't think it's as good a broadcast. I don't. Now, there are times when the 2 analysts, and they're usually former players, get into a spirited discussion and they may disagree about something, which is interesting sometimes. But overall, I find it to be difficult for, you know, the 2 of them have to decide who's going to talk next. So if we had a 3-man booth, which we did sometimes, I would always try to say, what's your opinion on that, Jim? And so Jim would speak first, so the other guy would not speak, and they wouldn't be on top of each other, because, you know, you're trying to maximize the time here. You just never know when somebody's going to hit into a double play and in the inning. So you don't want to have something hanging there if you can prevent it. And so the play-by-play guy really has to get out of the way. Now, that in itself is probably not that big a situation, but I agree with you. I just think for 2 analysts to try to make it work, it's difficult.
Yeah. Very good. Thanks again, Bill. Great to see you.
Thanks, Monty.
Thank you, Monty, for that question. This transitions into Ryan's question in the chat, and then we'll get to Dixie. But Ryan asks, how impactful, a Brownie, do you think Tim McCarver was as an analyst? He's not working today, so who is the best at analyzing today's game? So asking your opinion about that.
I think that Tim was very impactful. He really worked it very hard. He did some play-by-play with the Mets in addition to doing color most of the time. A long time, you know, catcher for 20 years. Obviously knew how to call a game, and working with people like Bob Gibson, he knew what excellence was and how to get that from a pitcher. I think that Tim was one of the iconic guys. A lot of people felt that he over-talked. I think that I would agree with that at times, just as a viewer on postseason sometimes. But I understand, you know, guys get pumped up to work and they want to talk. They you know, spend a lot of time on preparation, and they want to get that information out on the air. The key is, and I was guilty of this, especially when I started with the Astros the first few years. If I had some little nuggets, we'll say, that I thought were really interesting, I wanted to make sure I got them on the air. So I would put them on the air, but the timing was not always good. And yeah, it just falls flat if you're not mentioning this at the right time, whatever it is. And so the more I was on the air, the more I relaxed about it, and the more I understood, hey, if you don't get this on the air today, it's okay. It's fine. You can wait for the appropriate situation, and things went much better after that. But no, I thought Tim was, and today's analysts, probably Smoltz comes to mind. I think he's very good since he does, you know, postseason, and there are some other excellent ones too. But I can't really find any fault at all with John Smoltz. I think he's excellent.
All right, Brownie, thank you so much for sharing that. Let's turn to Dixie. Dixie's got a question. Dixie, go ahead and unmute yourself and jump in. Yeah, there should be a mute button down toward the bottom. You just need to unclick it. Are you having trouble, Dixie? All right, Dixie, I'm so sorry. Okay, you could drop it in the chat, or
Can you unmute? You can.
I don't. Let's see. You're good. Okay, okay. Ryan says Alt A to unmute. I don't know that I can unmute you. I'm so sorry, Dixie. If you want to put it in the chat, we could get your question that way, as an alternative. Okay,
Oh,
okay.
it doesn't have you on.
Oh, I see. Okay, okay. Dixie, I'm so sorry. I don't have the power to unmute you from my side. But hopefully we can try to get you in here. Maybe you can work through that and figure out how to turn your mic on.
Hey, Gilbert,
Yes. Yeah, Sai, go ahead.
maybe he could write his question on paper and hold it up to the camera. I don't
I
know.
was thinking that too.
Yeah, I mean it's possible depending on how long the question is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ryan, yeah, it doesn't look like Dixie has a keyboard, so those usual keyboard shortcuts aren't going to work here. But let me, you mentioned Bill, you mentioned Milo Hamilton, and of the inductees to the Astros Hall of Fame, there are 24 current ones. You and Billy Dorn will be 25 and 26. So that leaves only 2. You're only the second Astros broadcaster to be added to the Hall of Fame. Tell us a little bit about Milo Hamilton. I mean, I remember Milo, and I remember, Larry Durker kind of playing some tricks on Milo. I mean, he shared those stories with us, but Milo was very much the radio voice of the Astros and kind of solidly connected to the Astros and had some iconic calls, through his history as well. Hank Aaron's home run coming to mind. But what was it like working with Milo Hamilton? Tell us a little bit about that, if you could, Brownie.
Well, I learned a lot from Milo, and I will say also, Gilbert, that Gene Elston is inducted into the Astros Hall of Fame.
Pardon me, you're right.
Yeah, so Milo and Gene, both Cooperstown Hall of Famers as well, and very deserving, of course, of all those accolades. They were quite different as broadcasters, and in a way, I might draw something of a comparison to Harry Carey and Jack Buck, who were quite different on the air at the same time in St. Louis. But Milo was very powerful, and I think he really worked the drama too, similar to the way that Harry Carey did. Gene was more of an understated, like Jack Buck, factually correct, very accurate reporter type thing. So I would say Milo was excellent in every way. And when I was around him, even though we weren't really on the air together on games, he was on radio and I was on TV, but I could see why he was a Hall of Famer. That was very, very evident. And yet, I think that there's enough individualism in what we do. You have to realize you can't be that guy. And I knew I could not be Milo. I didn't have his voice. I didn't have his style. So that would have been wrong to try to emulate him. But Jack Buck was always kind of the voice in my head, and I wasn't trying to copy him, but it would just come out. And sometimes I would say something and I would just think, well, that's the way Jack Buck said it. And it was just part of my soul, I guess, from listening to it for so many years, just the way it came out. So I think, if I were to tell a young person today who would ask about style, I would just say, you're going to have to develop your own style. And I wouldn't try to copy someone I do think also that John Miller had an influence on me, even though we're roughly the same age, but with his humor. I just liked the way John Miller was casual, but worked humor in. And I thought he was one of the best. So he too is deserving with his spot in Cooperstown. But there are a lot of different styles out there. If you were to ask the average person, they probably wouldn't really register that. But if you're in the business and you do this every day for decades, you recognize the different styles, and some of them are, acceptable with your personality and where you can go with your gifts. Some of them are not.
Yeah. Brownie, thank you so much. Great hearing these different influences, that you've had, and I recognize them, in your own broadcast career. But then also know that, you created Brownie. I mean, you're Brownie. That's that's who you were true to, as you developed your broadcast voice. And I was just so fortunate to hear so much of it after those first few years. I don't want you to feel old, and I don't want to date myself too much, but I missed your first few years because I was in high school,
Right.
and enjoyed the Astros, but I certainly became very familiar with your voice and calling of the games. So thanks for sharing all of that. Looks like Dixie is unmuted. So let's get back to Dixie.
Okay.
Join us,
Good.
Dixie.
Sorry about that. That's the first time it ever froze up.
Quite all right.
Okay.
Everything froze. I couldn't move anything.
Ah,
One of my great pieces of memorabilia is that I have a certificate saying I attended the 1000th game at the Astrodome. By pure luck and happenstance. We happened to be on a trip. We were in Houston. We saw the game, and then we had to drive 100 miles to find a place to stay. Anyway, I've been an on the edge Astros fan since Terry Poole and Cesar Cedeno, but I really became a fan when the SABR convention was in Houston in 2014, the year that Sports Illustrated put out the greatest prediction in the history of sports predictions, saying that they would win the World Series in 3 years.
yeah.
Of all the guys on the front cover, John Singleton was one of the most highly touted, and he failed. Why did he fail?
I think I don't want to get into some of the off the field issues that he had, but he had them.
Okay.
And I think that was one reason. He struck out so much. He could never find a swing that worked for him for better contact. He just had too long a swing. When he connected, he had plenty of power, but he just struck out too much. And, I will say that as a general case, most of today's players do not have a two-strike approach at all. And, most of us grew up in an era when striking out was a definite black mark on a player. Now it's just an out. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think if there's a runner on third and one out, there can't be a strikeout there. There can't be a strikeout in that situation. There's no way a player could feel that he did anything positive if he struck out in that situation. And so, there's a need to make contact. Now, somebody might say, well, he hit a one hopper back to the pitcher and he didn't get the run home from third base. So what's the difference? And I would agree that he didn't do his job any better than the guy who struck out, but he hit the ball. And anytime you hit the ball, there's a chance something good can happen. There could be an error, could take a bad bounce. And I will never agree that strikeouts are no problem whatsoever. In terms of leading off an inning, sure, I get it. But, that's just the way I feel about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dixie, you mentioned that 2014 SABR convention. I believe that the SABR game was the Blue Jays were in town. I think R.A. Dickey was pitching. And I think John Singleton hit an inside the park home run that game, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was it was thrilling. It was a unseasonably cool night in Houston, and the roof was open. I just have these very vivid memories, but that was a very special convention, Dixie. So I'm so grateful you were there for that, because
I saw at least 3 games, maybe 4, I'm not sure. But I remember that Jose Altuve had like 5 hits and 5 flyouts to the warning track.
Great. It's great.
That's terrific. That's terrific. Oh, this is a great memories sharing with you. You know, Brownie, we're right about, we just crossed the 1 hour mark. I don't want to take up too much more of your Saturday afternoon here, but
It's okay.
yeah, let me ask if anybody else has a question, want to jump in. Anybody? David does. Yeah, David, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, it's nice seeing you, Bill. And
Thank you.
I'm a longtime Cincinnati Reds fan.
Good.
I've been a Reds fan since I'm 85. I will be 85 on the 13th. I've
Good.
been a Reds fan since Waite Hoyt was doing the announcing. Do you remember Waite Hoyt?
I have a story about Waite Hoyt, but go ahead first.
Well, the thing about Waite, he loved to have a rain delay, and he would talk for a long period of time about the games and about his participation and playing with Babe Ruth. Those were the most enjoyable as a kid growing up. I was, 6, 7 years old listening to him when I was in the 40s.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to bring that up. And another thing, when the Reds were on the road, they would have a teletype. They wouldn't go to the actual game. And this was all radio. This
That's
was
right.
just amazing. I just wanted to bring that up and tell me anything you know about Waite Hoyt.
All right. Well, I might stretch this hour into an hour and a half with this story, Gilbert, but you let me know. You give me 5 minutes and I'll try to hold it to 5 minutes. But
Thanks a
okay,
lot.
so one of the most pleasant guys I ever met in baseball, wonderful, wonderful man. And when I came to Cincinnati, Diane and I came right after we got out of the Army, came to Cincinnati. I was doing weekend sports on Channel 5. And I would love to have done baseball, but I was not ready. And I had never done minor league baseball. So I would always advise that from anybody who wants to do this job. I think that's the best training, but I had not had that kind of training. So I was doing weekend sports, and the program director came to me, and I've been there, since March, and this was September of '72. He said, "We need you to fly to Houston and fill in for Waite Hoyt on the Reds Astros game Sunday." I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Well, he's in the hospital and he can't make the trip." So at that point, Waite, as you mentioned, he had done radio and he had done play-by-play. And Waite was doing color on TV at that point with Tom Hedrick, the play-by-play man. And of course, my heart jumped into my throat, and I said, "Well, sure." And so I filled in for Waite, the Hall of Famer Waite Hoyt, and I'm thinking, I'm not ready for this at all. Now, I had been out to the ballpark a number of times. I had interviewed several players. I was doing a scoreboard show on our Reds TV network after the game, but I hadn't done a game. And the only thing I had done to prepare was I would take a little tape recorder with me, and I'd go out, and they told me, I was a booth announcer 3 nights a week. They said, "Hey, get out of the booth and go out to sporting events and learn what you can about Cincinnati sports." So I'd take a little tape recorder, I'd find an empty broadcast booth, and I'd get the game notes and everything. I'd go down there and I'd do a few innings because this is what I want to do with my life. But, I needed to have some experience. And a lot of times it was terrible. I listened to the tape. It was absolutely terrible. And I would be more determined the next night I went out to do a better job. But I really was not ready for this. So I got on the charter and flew to Houston with the Reds. And at the last minute, they decided they were going to add the Friday night game to their schedule. We were not supposed to televise until Sunday. Back in those days, we only televised about 35 Reds games a year. And so they were in a position to clinch the division title that night. So they add, to add to all the angst and all the drama, right? For Brownie trying to figure out how to do baseball. So I sat down with Tom Hedrick, the play-by-play guy, before the game, and he said, "Have you ever done baseball?" I said, "No." And so that told him right away the challenge that he was facing that night. Well, Tom's nickname was the Parrot. The Parrot loved to talk. And that was a positive for me because he could talk as much for two people.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have to talk. And so I sat there for about 8 innings, and I don't think I said 7 or 8 words during those 8 innings. I was absolutely petrified of saying the wrong thing. And so then after the 8th inning, the producer of the telecast said, well, Tom, it's time for you to go down to the field, because if we maintain this 4-3 lead and clinch the division, we're going to have you interviewing players on the field for the celebration. So I looked around and no one else was in the booth except me. So here I am doing play-by-play of a division clinching game, my first game ever in the big leagues.
Wow.
And but Waite Hoyt wrote me the nicest note that I still have. And Waite was also an artist. And he had a snow scene that he had painted on the front of this note card. Beautiful, beautiful. So, the trees with the snow and the road through it. And I will always have that note from Waite Hoyt. Very, very meaningful guy to me. And so, you know, who gets that initiation in Major League Baseball? Who starts out that way?
That's incredible. I mean, and you know, like, I'm wondering if down the road, Brownie, are you considering like an audio book of Brownie's lost tapes of your early broadcasting as part of Sportscasting 101?
Oh boy. I would be ashamed to have kids listen to that tape, you know, all those tapes. I would be too embarrassed to have them listen to that. Except that as an example of, hey, no matter how bad you sound, you might be able to get to go someday.
You obviously made it through the 9th inning of that game. How were you feeling when it was over?
I don't think I was feeling anything. I think I was numb. What happened was our closer, Clay Carroll, walked the bases loaded with a 1-run lead.
Oh,
and he still got the final out. So just one of those stories that you don't hear very often.
They were not going to let you go quietly that night.
No, but the other thing about Waite Hoyt I want to tell you was he did something that I don't think any other broadcaster has ever done. And you may have read about this. When he did the radio play-by-play, he did it in the past tense.
Yeah.
So he would say, Lynch hit a ground ball to shortstop, Mion moved to his right, and he threw him out by 2 steps.
Right.
And people would ask, well, why are you doing this in the past? He said, because it's already happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's terrific.
He was a character.
I love that. And, you know, Brownie, because most of us have the benefit of hearing some of the iconic calls that you've done throughout Astros history. It's like, it's difficult to imagine you being tongue-tied, being petrified, you know, but for a first moment, I certainly understand. Boy, what a baptism. And in Houston, no less.
Yeah. And, you know, and Waite Hoyt was such a beloved figure, and people were probably trying to figure out who this other guy was, but they used to make record albums of Waite Hoyt's rain delay stories that he would tell on the radio. Yeah.
Wow, that's terrific. Okay, David, we'll get to you in just a second. Ryan's got a question, so let's go to Ryan and then we'll go to David.
Thank you. I know that Milo and Harry had similar styles, and they kind of clashed a little bit because I'm thinking because of the similar styles. But I'm wondering how you build a rapport with partners with different personalities and viewpoints.
That's a great question, Ryan. Of course, I think when you're the new guy in town, the best approach is to keep your mouth shut. So that's what I tried to do.
That's what you did for 8 innings, but it didn't work, did it?
Can be done.
Well, And I would be very honest with you and tell you that of all the broadcasters I knew, probably Harry, and I didn't even know Harry, but Milo and Harry, their egos were probably near the top of the list. I will say that. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think in many ways it kind of goes with the job, but also, you are who you are. And so I would always try to defer to Milo and not cross swords with him, not say anything that he would find offensive or disagreeable or anything like that, because I just didn't think that was my place at all.
Yeah, evidently Durker, I think, maybe took on that role sometimes, perhaps.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
All right, let's get to David. Maybe the last question here, David.
No, a lot of question. It's Bill referring to that LP, that Waite Hoyt. I have that, and I'm going to bring it to the SABR meeting next time.
Oh, you guys are in for a treat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Thanks
terrific.
very much. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, thank you, David. Brownie, this has been a treat today. I'm so thankful you could join us today as we celebrate SABR Day. But also, we celebrate, this is Brownie Day, we celebrate Brownie, and really so happy to see you enter the Astros Hall of Fame. Well deserved. And we could just go on and on with the great stories. And a lot has been written, about some of your iconic calls and things like that. But I really wanted to talk about these other things and not dominate this too much, as I can do sometimes when we're talking about the Astros. But I loved hearing about, your broadcasting start. I hadn't heard that story about that baptism of fire. So I really am so glad David asked that question so you could tell that story. But then also, just your broadcast style and how that came to be. You're sort of a finished product in my mind, because you were so polished ever since I first started hearing you. And it's so humanizing, to hear that we all go through a journey, and we're all beginners at some point, and we work at it and we get better. But Brownie, congratulations again to you. I can't wait for August. Rayanne and I hopefully will be there to see the actual induction and be part of the cheers at Minute Maid Park. So thank you very much for taking time today to share this with us today.
Well, thank you. And I just want to say glory be to God for keeping his hand on our lives. And I'm very, very thankful for that. So, and thanks to all of you who joined us today. It was great to see everybody.
Thank you, Brownie. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, we're gonna continue with our meeting. We have Jerry Miller has a quiz for us, and don't know if there are any prizes. Maybe there's a virtual prize, or maybe one that'll be delivered next meeting. But Cy is in the room, so we need to be mindful of that. And we got to see if we can knock them off. We'll see.
Bring your A game.
Yeah,
So,
I could just shorten these proceedings by just giving the award to Cy right now. If you like.
Oh, no.
well, I'm reminded, Jerry. I'm reminded of the story.
We don't have Ryan here to pass out pencils, but if everybody wants to get their scorecards ready, then I'll go ahead.
Yeah, Jerry. So
yes.
I'm reminded of this story about Larry Bird going to the NBA All-Star break, and I guess they had their 3-point shooting contest, and cocky Larry Bird, as he was known to be, walked into the locker room and said, "Okay, so who's playing for second?" He would say, and Cy would never say such a thing, because Cy's so gentlemanly and nice and modest. He would never say such a thing.
Well, I thought about that, and that's why I have two awards to give here. So, when we have 9 people here, so one giving the award or the quiz. So you have a 2 out of 8 or 1 out of 4 chance of going home with something.
All right, here we go.
Anyway, there are a total of 18 questions. 2 of them have 2 answers, so there are a total of 20 points. the theme of the quiz is pitchers as batters. Now, we know that 2022 was the first year of the universal DH, and depending upon your attitude, Armageddon and the end of civilization as we know it. And barring some kind of bizarre move by Joe Madden or Tony La Russa, who I guess is not likely to, to have one, we aren't going to be seeing pitchers bat anymore. So with that in mind, I thought I would bid farewell to the era of pitchers as batters with this quiz. So let's get started here. Question number one. Which San Diego Padre pitcher gave up Bartolo Colon's one and only major league home run? Padres pitcher who gave up Bartolo Colon's only home run. You've all seen the video, so weigh in. Number two, who was the last pitcher, and it was in the 2018 NLCS, to hit a postseason home run? And you get brownie points in honor of our guest if you know the future Hall of Fame pitcher that he hit it off. But again, that's only a brownie point. Doesn't count. It doesn't count, but that gives you an additional clue. Okay, and let me know if I'm going through this too fast. Number three, who was the first pitcher in 1920 to hit a home run in the World Series? And you'll get more brownie points if you can name the other two firsts that occurred in that game, one of which has yet to be duplicated. Okay, so number three, first pitcher to hit a home run in the World Series, and it was in 1920. Question four, who was the last pitcher to hit a home run in the World Series? Hint number one is that he did it in 2008 for the Phillies. Hint number two is that next year is his first year of eligibility for the Hall of Fame, but he will be lucky if he gets on the ballot, in my opinion. Okay, so question four, the last pitcher to hit a home run in the World Series for the 2008 Phillies. Question five, and this is one of them that has two answers. Who are the only two pitchers to both hit a home run and win the MVP award in the same World Series? And the hint is that they did it in consecutive series. So question five, the only two pitchers to both hit home runs and win MVP in the same World Series. Question six, which San Diego Padres pitcher was the last to hit a walk-off home run? And because I feel bad about it, I'll even give you the year. It was 1986. Last pitcher to hit a walk-off home run, 1986. Question seven, who was the only pitcher to hit 2 grand slams in a game? And the hint is that he did it for the Atlanta Braves in 1966. And so I expect some of you old timers to get this one right. Yeah, well, there you go. Okay. Question 8. Who holds the career mark for most home runs hit as a pitcher? And the hint, and by the way, all of these questions exclude Shohei Ohtani because he screws up the entire quiz. But who is the only who holds the career mark for the most home runs hit as a pitcher? The hint is that he's not in the Hall of Fame, but his brother is. Okay, so that was question number 8. Question number 9. Within 3, how many of his 714 home runs did Babe Ruth hit as a pitcher? Okay. How many home runs did Babe Ruth hit as a pitcher? The next question is a related question, number 10. Within 20, what number home run of Ruth's 714 was his last hit as a pitcher? So somewhere in the 714, pick the number of the home run that was hit as a pitcher, and you've got 20 home run, a 40 home run leeway there. Okay. Question 11. Name the Hall of Fame pitcher that twice hit 7 home runs in a single season. Hall of Fame pitcher that hit 7 home runs twice in a single season. Question 12. Who was the first American League pitcher to hit a home run after the adoption of the designated hitter? And hint, his son now plays in the major leagues. So this would be back in, not in 2022 when the National League when we had the universal DH, but back when the American League first established the DH. Okay. Question 13. Which Baltimore Oriole was the last American League pitcher to hit a home run as a pitcher? And again, not counting Shohei Ohtani. So an American League pitcher who was a pitcher at the time he hit and hit a home run. Okay, that was 13. Question 14. What pitcher hit 2 home runs while pitching a no-hitter the same day? And the clue is that he was traded on separate occasions for 2 different Hall of Famers. So a pitcher who hit 2 home runs while pitching a no-hitter. Question 15. Which Astro, and again, which Astro was the last pitcher in Game 5 of the 2021 World Series to bat in a major league game prior to the adoption of the universal DH? So in other words, who was the last hitting pitcher other than regular, or the other other than the whatever freak show comes up later? But this is prior to the adoption of the universal DH. And the hint is that another Astro pitcher batted in the same game, but did so as a pinch hitter. Okay, question 16. Who are the only 2 pitchers, and this is the second one that has 2 answers. Who are the only 2 pitchers to hit 2 World Series home runs in their career? Hint number 1, both of them played for teams named after birds. And hint number 2, one is a Hall of Famer, the other had a lasting impact on the game for very different reasons and only after he retired. So again, 2 pitchers who hit 2 home runs career in World Series. Question 17. The player with the most at-bats against Nolan Ryan without striking out is Julian Javier with 16. This pitcher, however, is close with 12. He won 2 Silver Slugger awards. The clues are there are 3 clues. Okay, for the pitcher who batted 12 times against Nolan Ryan without striking out. First, he won 2 Silver Slugger awards. Second clue is he once beat out Ryan for the Cy Young Award, with Ryan finishing 4th. And the third is that his name has been in the news recently. Okay, pitcher who batted 12 times against Nolan Ryan without striking out. And the last question, number 18, speaking of the Silver Slugger Award, who is the only pitcher to win it more than 3 times? And he won it a total of 5 times. And the hint is that he did it 5 times in a row for 4 different teams. Only pitcher to win the Silver Slugger Award more than 3 times. And I'll be happy to repeat any of the questions if anybody needs it. Everybody did that? That was pretty good. Okay. All right. So let's go to the answer. The question, and feel free to pipe up if you think you know the answer. Which question 1, which Padre pitcher gave up Bartolo Colon's one and only major league home run? Anyone? The answer is James Shields, former Royals pitcher.
Big game, James Shields.
Big game, James. I think that was James Worthy, but whatever. So,
Yeah, you know how the White Sox got James Shields? They only had to give up Fernando Tatis.
okay, well that didn't cost them very much. Okay. Number 2, last pitcher to hit a postseason home run. It was in 2018 for the Milwaukee Brewers, and it was Brandon Woodruff who hit it off of Clayton Kershaw. Number 3, the first pitcher to hit a home run in the World Series in 1920.
Jim Bagby, unassisted triple play, first grand slam, Smith.
Okay, yes, correct. You got all 3 points. Were you there?
I think so sometime.
Oh, okay. But if you didn't hear, Jim Bagby hit the home run. Elmer Smith hit the first World Series grand slam, and Bill Wambsgott turned the first and only unassisted triple play in the World Series in 1920. And what stadium was it at, for anybody?
Cleveland's Municipal? No, Cleveland's League Park? League Park?
It was at League Park, which, by the way, still stands.
Yes.
Sort of.
At least they still have the ticket booth out there. If you're ever in Cleveland, it's worth the trip. They have a museum there.
Well, they rebuilt the whole stadium.
Well, they rebuilt
the
the
field,
whole
not the
stadium. It's like
stadium, but they rebuilt the
AstroTurf now,
field.
which they didn't have in 1920. But the ticket booth there is the original
Yes.
from 1920. It's also where Babe Ruth hit his 700th home run. Definitely worth the trip. Question 6. Which Padres pitcher was the last to hit a walk-off home run in
Question 5. Question 5. Question 5.
I'm sorry?
Wasn't there a question 5?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh,
Well,
yes,
wrong-
okay.
wrong question
Question
two.
5. Who are the only pitchers to hit a home run and win the MVP in the World Series?
Padres and Larson?
No.
Gibson and Lolich.
Bob Gibson.
Yes, Monty got it. Bob Gibson in 1967 and Mickey Lolich in 1968.
Jerry, what was the answer to number 4?
Number 4 was, I'm sorry. Well, okay. I'm sorry. I really jumped ahead here. Hopefully people are able to keep track. The last pitcher to hit a home run in the World Series was Joe Blanton for the Phillies in 2008. So we have Jim Bagby is number 3, Joe Blanton is number 4, Gibson and Lolich is number 5. Number 6, who was the last Padres? Who was the last pitcher to hit a walk-off home run for the Padres in 1986? I'd be surprised if anybody got this. It was Craig Lefferts. Number 7, who was the only pitcher to hit 2 grand slams in a single game?
Tony Cloninger on my birthday.
Oh, congratulations! Did he dedicate the home runs to you?
I don't think he did, but it was July 3rd, 66.
8 RBIs too. That's a pretty good. Too bad you're not a Braves fan.
Well, Jerry, that's the first one I got.
Oh, really? Wow. Oh, I may need to mail these things to Dixie in near Fenway Park, or drop them off there on my way to a Red Sox game. Okay. Number 8. The career mark for most home runs hit as a pitcher.
Wes Farrell.
Yes, correct. Brother of undeserving Hall of Famer Rick Farrell. And he hit
35, 37.
37.
Wow.
And he also holds the single season record at 9. Very good hitting pitcher. Probably a better hitter than his brother. Number 9, within 3, how many of his 714 home runs did Babe Ruth hit as a pitcher?
20?
Anyone? I'm sorry?
I said 20.
You're just outside the range.
Oh,
The answer is 14. So anywhere between 11 and 17 gets credit for that for that question. Okay. Number 10, within 20, what number of his of Ruth's 714 was his last hit as a pitcher? And again, you've got a 40 home run. Anybody want to guess?
708.
Close, very close.
650.
Nope, somewhere in between.
But
It was number 686 on October 1st, 1933. I'm assuming that they were playing out the string that year, and since it was late in the season, that they let him pitch. And so anywhere between 666 and 706 gets credit for that.
Oh, I thought you said within 40.
Well, 20 each way.
Oh, 12 now. Okay.
20 each way. So, okay. Number 11, name the Hall of Fame pitcher that twice hits 7 home runs in a season.
Drysdale.
Very good. You're looking like the leader in the clubhouse.
Yeah.
here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I don't
was
think I
either
can
him or
catch him at this
Spawn.
point, and I doubt I got any right. So
Number 12. Who was the first American League pitcher to hit a home run after the adoption of the designated hitter? And that would have been back in the 70s. And his son now plays in the major leagues and has the same name, by the way. Anyone? Bobby Witt. Son, of course, is
wait, the first Bobby Witt played in the 70s.
apparently, well, or was the last one to hit a home run. That's not, I should clarify. The DH, of course, was adopted in the 70s. I don't know when he hit his home run. I'd have to look that up. But obviously, pitchers were not batting, after that. So it took a freak show for for a pitcher to actually get up and actually hit a home run. So I'd have to look at the date of that. But that's a good point. Number 14. Which pitcher
13.
hit 2? I'm sorry.
I think it's 13.
Yes, you're right. Okay. Number 13. It's on 2 different pages. That's why I'm confused here. What Baltimore Oriole was the last American pitcher to hit a home run as a pitcher? Anyone? It was Zach Britton, again on your birthday, Dick, July the 3rd, 2011. That was a big day for hitting pitchers. Number 14, am I on the right? I'm on the right one, I hope, right?
Yes.
Okay. Number 14, which pitcher hit 2 home runs while also pitching a no-hitter the same day?
Rick Wise.
Correct. And who are the 2 for Brownie points? Who are the 2 home runner Hall of Famers that he was traded for?
Steve Carlton was one.
Yes.
I don't know the other.
The second was former Red Sox Dennis Eckersley.
Wow.
Late in his career, in both of their careers, actually. Which Astro pitcher was the last pitcher to hit a home run? I'm sorry, to hit in a major league game prior to 2022. We'll make it easier that way. Anybody? It was Kendall Graveman was a pitcher and hit in game 5 of the 2021 World Series. Was the last pitcher to officially at bat prior to the universal DH. And Zach Greinke also batted in that game, but he was a pinch hitter.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Number 16 also has 2 answers. Who are the only 2 pitchers to hit 2 World Series home runs? One of them's already been mentioned.
Must be Gibson.
That's correct. And the second one, who
Dave
had an
McNally.
game after he retired. I'm sorry?
McNally.
Yes, Dave McNally is the other one. Okay. Number 17, the pitcher who had 12 at-bats against Nolan Ryan without striking out. And his number was recently retired by the Dodgers, Fernando Valenzuela. And number 18, the only pitcher to win more than 3 Silver Slugger awards. He won 5 of them for 4 different teams, and it's one of them was the Astros. So Gilbert, you're on the hot seat now. There's an Astros question that you don't know the answer to. Anybody? It was Mike Hampton.
Oh,
For the Astros, Mets, Rockies, and Braves. So if everybody wants to total up their score, and let's see if we have, and let's see.
Well, I got 5.
How many did you get, Gilbert?
it's quiet.
I'm sorry. How many did you have, Si?
5.
Okay, do we hear 6?
I've got 6.
We got 6 for Jan. Do we hear 7? Dixie, how many did you get? 5. Oh, an upset here. Okay.
Whoa.
Well, see, I was fearful that Jan would win this quiz because he's the only person I've ever met who actually likes the DH. But fair is fair. Jan is the winner. Dixie, do you mind if I give you your tied for second place prize when you come to one of these meetings in person?
Next time I'm there.
Okay, well, Jan, your first place prize is a team picture of the 1966 Atlanta Braves featuring Tony Cloninger.
Fantastic.
And I guess, Si, we're going to go to the complete other side right now. And Si, your second place award, just to highlight the disparity between good hitting pitchers and bad hitting pitchers, is a picture of Dean Chance, who is absolutely one of the worst hitting pitchers I've ever seen in my life. Great pitcher, the only pitcher between 63 and 66, not named Sandy Koufax to win a Cy Young Award, but he was a terrible hitter.
Great.
There you go.
Thanks.
And Gilbert, I will email you the quiz.
Yeah, the quiz and the answers.
And the answers.
Yeah, because I got shut out in this one. I got completely shut out.
I even threw in a couple of Astros questions for you.
Well, I object, Jerry. You should have asked the last pitcher to get an RBI in the World Series. That was perfectly within the theme of this quiz. And you didn't ask. That? Well, that would be Lance McCullers.
Okay.
So, so I'm very sad.
You have an answer without a question. Poor Gilbert.
Was that 2017?
No, actually in 2021.
Okay, but prior to last,
yes,
okay.
Prior, yes.
Well, Jerry, can I say something about Dean Chance?
Yes.
Well, at Baseball Reference, I got all kinds of stats, and you probably heard of win probability added. Like, if a guy hits a home run in the bottom of the ninth, it adds like 0.75 wins because it increases the probability of winning by that much. Well, they also have something called championship win probability. Okay, like how much impact did an at-bat or plate appearance have on a team winning a championship? And all the really high ones are like postseason ones, including like when there was a tie for the pennant, like Bobby Thompson's really big. But something that wasn't a playoff or postseason or regularly scheduled regular season game, he allowed the most impactful championship plate appearance ever, and it was against Carl Yastrzemski. And I think in like the last game of the year in 1967, I think he had a single to drive in 2 runs to put the Red Sox ahead, and then they beat the Twins to win the pennant, and that was off Dean Chance.
Okay.
So that was a long story for a long tale for very little benefits.
Well, my recollection of Dean Chance is I have to go look back in my garage because I could swear I used to keep like baseball scrapbooks with like clippings from the newspapers and everything like that. And I swear somewhere in my garage, I have a picture of I don't know what Dean Chance's batting stats were, but there was a picture in the newspaper in the mid 60s of him at bat, and I swear he looked like my mother at bat. I mean, the batting, it was the absolute worst batting stance that I've ever seen in my life, and I think that the results, reflected that.
Well, Jerry, thank you so much for this very interesting quiz, a very challenging quiz. Really appreciate the quizzes that you bring, and congratulations to Jan for winning. Jan, I think this means you're on the hook for next month's quiz.
I'll work hard on it.
Okay.
Try to avoid the shutout.
Yeah, yes, yes. You know, I don't do great on these quizzes, but it's also true that I am rarely shut out. So I will go off into the wilderness and contemplate my baseball credentials. But Dixie's got something. What do you got, Dixie?
Jerry, I believe you said on Tony Cloninger's home runs that he had 8 RBIs in that game. He had 9.
Yeah, 9, yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, okay, okay. I
Because
was
the
just,
strange thing is that he's tied with another pitcher, Harry Staley, for the franchise record of 9.
Hmm.
Harry Staley did that in 1894 or something, or 93. But anyway, the pitchers with Aaron and Matthews and Adcock and all those people, the 2 pitchers have the record of 9 RBIs in a game.
well, they say that records are made to be broken, so there you go. Who would have thunk it? Hey, Gilbert, if you, when you're going off to contemplate the quiz, you can be like Aaron Rodgers and go sit in the dark for 2 days or something.
Oh, God.
Or I guess you had that last week.
Well, I certainly did have that last week with
last week.
the 2.5 days, 3 days without power because of the ice storm. Yes. But you know, I don't appreciate the comparison to Aaron Rodgers, but I'll take that up with you personally later, Jerry. Although I do want to congratulate the Dodgers organization for retiring Fernando Valenzuela's number. You know, I was in junior high and I did a report for school about Fernando Valenzuela. I very much had Fernando mania fever way back then. And I remember a lot of the players on that Dodgers team. And kind of a funny thing for this Astros fan to say, but it's the truth. I love baseball way back then. The Astros have always been my team, but I liked other teams too. And I was very fond of Fernando Valenzuela. Love that Astros cap there, Dixie. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Just for
Fernando
interest,
was, I was going to say Fernando is the all-time winningest Mexican-born pitcher. But Dennis Martinez is the all-time winning Hispanic pitcher.
From Nicaragua.
Yeah, from Nicaragua, yeah.
Oh,
Not in the Hall of
Presidente.
Fame.
Yeah. They're having a whole weekend in August to celebrate for the retirement of Fernando's.
Fernando, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to retire Hideo Nomo's number though.
Oh.
Don't think so.
I was going to mention Dean Chance was a lifetime 066 hitter, a lifetime OPS plus of -46.
Oh, God.
He batted above 100 once in his career, and that was a 150 batting average in 1963. And that was also his high water mark in OPS plus of -3.
I've always wondered, you know, what would any of us bat if we we're in the major leagues during our athletic primes, and I've always thought, you take whatever the averages of the worst hitting pitcher you can think of. I mean, pitchers are still athletes, even if they can't hit. So I'm thinking, you know, could any of us beat out Dean Chance? I would like to think so, but I don't know the answer.
That's about 1 out of 15 at the plate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Jerry, if you go the opposite direction, you know, and consider what Shohei Ohtani has been able to do, to play at a high level on both sides of the ball, so to speak, that's remarkable in and of itself as well. But this has been a lot of fun talking baseball. It was a real thrill to have Brownie with us earlier. I'm so glad we recorded this so we can share this with everybody. And then the great quiz from Jerry. Got to talk about some great baseball memories and some of them personal memories that we've had of some of these players. Dixie, do you have something to add here as we're rounding out here?
Last thing, Ron Herbel hit 029.
Yes, he was also legendary.
I think he's the worst.
I remember him and Bob Buell was also pretty bad. For some reason, pitchers were worse batters in the 60s.
Hey, Gilbert.
Yes, I
I had a question I wanted to throw out and see what people thought. Kyle Tucker, he just lost his arbitration case, and I think he's going to get paid $5 million. Is that right?
That's right.
Now, isn't the major league average somewhere in the $4 million range?
I'm not sure.
I mean, I think that's, if that's above the major league average, it's not much. And this is a guy that has had 2 straight years with a WAR of over 5.0, which is very good. I mean, I'm just surprised.
What was his requested salary?
I think it was
Yeah.
7.5.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
thought.
7.5, that's right.
I mean, I'm just thinking,
Was it his first or his second or third arbitration?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the arbitrators kind of index that first, second, third arbitration and comparable players. You think the comparable players would have raised him up?
I think the Astros are going to be paying like $1 million for each WAR, and I think probably in the open market it's like probably several multiples. I mean, that's like a steal.
Well, didn't their pitcher get like 6.5 million yesterday or something like that?
I don't know.
Well,
I didn't see
Javier,
that.
well, he signed to an extension,
Right.
66 million or 68 million over 5
How
years.
long?
5 years.
This was Tucker's first year of arbitration eligibility.
Yeah.
Man.
That has something to do with it.
Oh,
Yeah.
but
Sai,
boy,
it's hard. I mean, it's hard to know like what's going on behind the scenes, but I know, I mean, based on the record interviews and so forth, the Astros are engaged with Tucker on an extension similar to what they did with Christian Javier.
Oh, okay. Because I'm not taking sides or anything. I just thought, wow, this is a very high quality player so far the last 2 years, and it's like dirt cheap $5 million for someone like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Astros fans, very much want to see Tucker extended because they think he's the real deal and recognize his value. But the Astros, I mean, if they can pay him $5 million for the year, well, they'll do so because it'll allow them to put resources elsewhere.
Sure, yeah.
So that's just part of the business. It doesn't necessarily reflect the player's value. But
okay, well,
usually they try to like resolve them before they even get to a hearing. And of course, in baseball arbitration, you have to pick one figure.
Right, yeah.
You can't split the baby.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, if Tucker needs a new agent or something, maybe
well,
that's
Jerry, also remember that the Astros fired James Click a few days after the World Series, and they were without a GM until just a couple of weeks ago when they hired Dana Brown from the Atlanta Braves. And apparently, Dana Brown has a reputation for locking up some of these young players. Look at what the Braves have done, locking up a good number of their high quality young players for extensions. And so a lot of Astro fans are excited because Christian Javier was signed to an extension. They're hoping the same is going to happen for Tucker. And then I think Altuve and Bregman are signed through next year. And so, are they going to get some kind of deal at some point? I mean, they very much become the faces of the Astros, but the Astros have young pitching tied up. I mean, we're talking like the next 4 or 5 years. And they're in really good shape as far as who they have on their roster. And as Brownie pointed out, it comes down to health. And then we all know the playoffs are a crapshoot. Who knows what's going to happen?
Well, Altuve signed through 2024.
So the end of next year, right? And Bregman also. Yeah. So I imagine there's probably going to be some attention there. I would love to see Altuve play the rest of his career with the Astros. But
he might, but not at the salaries they're paying him.
Right.
Loose ends. Bob Buell is 3 times better. His average was 0.89.
it's still pretty bad though.
3 times better than Herbal.
All right, so folks, we plan to be back in person next month. So unless Ryan and Dixie are planning a road trip to Texas, we might not see them. But Sai, I know you're in San Antonio. Maybe you can come up. But
sure, yeah.
What we're tentatively planning, we'll make an announcement. But what we're tentatively planning is a Saturday lunch meeting on March 18th. probably at the Hurricane Grill. We've met at before up in Round Rock. That's the tentative plan at the moment. I just want to check with Ryan Pollock, our webmaster and part of the leadership team, and hope that that date works for him. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us.
Great
for this
fun.
meeting.
Thanks.
Lots of fun. Thank you for taking the time today. Pepper behind me on the windowsill has turned her back on everybody, so she's letting us know she's done. I hope you all have a great day. Thank you, Ryan and Dixie especially, but for everybody for joining us. You all have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Oh,
Kibble
yeah,
for the
Dan-
kitty.
Dan
Kibble
has
for the
already-
kitty.